to see what comes out. Do stay with us as we have further updates, this time from the foreign policy angle. US President Donald Trump has said that he will talk to Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro as US military has built up tensions in the Caribbean. Trump added that he would be okay with US anti-drug strikes inside Mexico. Trump has sharply boosted the US military presence in the Caribbean to combat what he describes as drug trafficking networks operating outside of several Latin American nations, including Venezuela and Mexico. Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that Washington is moving to designate a cartel allegedly linked to Maduro as a terrorist organization. Raymond joins us once again. Raymond, of course, we know that Donald Trump is a fan of leader-to-leader diplomacy. What are the chances of him having a conversation with Nicolas Maduro and this de-escalating? Do you think there's any possibility of that happening?
Well, you know, in order to wage peace, which is the ultimate goal, peace with justice, you have to have a strategy and you have to have partners. That has not been the approach of Donald Trump. President Trump prides himself on being the great man to be able to come out on top of any transaction. So it is quite natural that after acting as prosecutor, judge, jury, and executioner by destroying boats at sea, that he will then say that he can solve the problem as the great man in a conversation with Maduro. Of course, this approach has not worked in regard to Ukraine. It's not worked in regard to many of the problems which he claims to be able to solve. I think it's always better to have talking rather than killing, but the idea that you're going to be able to resolve these international problems through a face-to-face real estate kind of transaction talk is just not borne out by the facts. And in fact, it seems to me that what it does is lead to further difficulties and the greater likelihood of hostilities.
And Raymond, of course, Donald Trump cites the drug flow into the United States, the fentanyl crisis, of course, which has been plaguing the US for years as the reason for this buildup, this military buildup in the Caribbean, has declared war on narco-terrorists. However, most of the drugs going into the United States, of course, comes from border crossing points and not from Venezuela. What could be the motive here of this military buildup, if it isn't that?
Well, the motive is obvious, and that is to try to exert domination over what President Trump considers as part of his empire. And his empire extends to those who disagree with him in South America, Latin America. He's really a throwback to the late 19th century when the United States tried to send in the Marines in order to solve problems in Central and South America. So the whole drug approach is really a smokescreen for a domination kind of theory, an empire kind of theory. This is not the way in which the world had been trending since World War II, to try to have institutions, to have police powers, to be able to solve matters with some sense of rule of law, and looking to a future of peace and prosperity. This is not President Trump's approach. It's one which runs counter to provisions of international law, particularly the United Nations Charter, but that is the course upon which he is set.
Raymond Vickery, thank you very much for talking to us, and also profuse apologies, of course, for those technical issues faced just then. Okay, we're now moving on. And US President Donald Trump will roll out the red carpet for Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. This visit is expected to advance the sale of F-35 fighter jets and a host of business deals. It will be the first trip by bin Salman to the United States since the 2018 killing of Saudi critic Jamal Khashoggi by Saudi agents in Istanbul, which triggered global outrage. On the Jamal Khashoggi case, the US intelligence had concluded that Mohammed bin Salman had approved the capture or killing of Khashoggi. Meanwhile, the Crown Prince denied ordering the operation. He acknowledged responsibility as the leader of the country. The warm welcome the Crown Prince will receive in Washington is the latest sign that relations have recovered from the deep strain caused by the murder case. As per reports, US-Saudi deals are expected on technology, manufacturing, defense, and more. Now we move on, and a US judge has ruled that there is evidence of misconduct in how a federal prosecutor, Lindsay Halligan, secured criminal charges against former FBI Director James Comey. US Magistrate Judge William Fitzpatrick found significant legal errors in presenting evidence and instructing grand jurors, potentially undermining the integrity of the case. The judge ordered that the grand jury materials be turned over to Comey's defense lawyers, calling it an extraordinary remedy necessary due to unique circumstances. Comey faces charges of making false statements and obstructing a congressional investigation. Critics, including Comey, argue that the charges are politically motivated, tied to President Trump's personal animus towards Comey. Fitzpatrick highlighted investigative mistakes such as reviewing evidence without a warrant and exposing attorney-client privilege material. Despite this, the trial judge temporarily halted the order. Joining us now is... Okay, apologies there once again. We now move on, and more than 130 people suspected of being in the US illegally were detained in Charlotte, North Carolina over the weekend as the Trump administration ramped up its nationwide deportation campaign. Customs and Border Protection says arrests were made on Saturday and Sunday, but offered no details on ongoing operations. Local leaders in Charlotte and Raleigh are urging calm, stressing that constitutional rights must be protected. Charlotte Mayor V. Lyles says the city stands with residents feeling anxious. The crackdown has sparked peaceful protests, including a student walkout, and some Latino-owned businesses have closed amid fear and uncertainty. Governor Josh Stein has sharply criticized the raids, calling agents' tactics paramilitary and accusing them of racial profiling. Homeland Security says the operation stemmed from local officials refusing nearly 1,400 federal detainer requests. The timeline for when Charlotte operations will end remains unclear. And that's a wrap on America 360. Keep